I bought my husband's father a wheelchair that cost me $2,500. Not because I had that kind of money to throw around, but because after his surgery he was completely immobile and nobody else in the family lifted a finger to help him. Nobody even bothered to research what kind of equipment he needed or how soon he'd need it. But I did. I went to 3 different medical suppliers. I argued over delivery times. I maxed out one of my credit cards to make sure it was at his door before he was discharged. I thought I was showing compassion. I thought I was proving to my husband's family that I was serious about being part of them, that when they were in need, I wouldn't just talk about family, I would act on it. And yet, when we all sat down for dinner a week later, instead of gratitude, instead of even a hint of acknowledgement, his father leaned back in that very same chair I had nearly bankrupted myself to buy and cracked a joke at my expense that made the entire table laugh. And in that moment, as their voices filled the room, I realized I had never been seen as family at all, only as someone to be used, mocked, and discarded, and that realization would change everything. They laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard, like humiliating me was a bonding activity. My husband smirking, his mother shaking her head at me like I was some naive fool, his sister whispering something to her husband, and both of them snickering while I sat there frozen, trying to process. The fact that the man I'd sacrificed so much for, the man who had called me daughter in his hospital bed when he was weak and scared, now thought it was perfectly fine to turn me into the family punchline. And worse, that nobody defended me, not even the man I was married to, who knew exactly what that wheelchair had cost me. Not just the money, but the hours of anxiety, the calls, the skipped meals, the dread of debt collectors. Yet he didn't stop them. He didn't put a hand on mine or say, "Enough." He let me sit there swallowing my pride with cold food while they stripped me of every ounce of dignity. And all I could think was, if this is how they treat me when I give, how would they treat me if I stopped? That night when we got home, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while my husband snored beside me, the echo of their laughter still burning in my ears, and I replayed every second of that dinner like a cruel film reel. How his father smirked when he leaned back in the wheelchair, tapping the armrest as if to say, "Look what she wasted her money on." How his mother's lips curled in that patronizing smile that always carried the message, "You'll never be good enough for our son." How? His sister tilted her wine glass toward me like I was some charity case, whispering about how I must really want approval if she's buying gifts that expensive. And the worst part was the silence of my husband. His silence cut deeper than any words could have, because if he had defended me even once in those endless minutes of mockery, if he had said, "Stop, she did this because she cares," then maybe I could have endured it. Maybe I could have chalked it up to family insensitivity. But his silence told me everything. It told me that in his eyes, too, I was just convenient, someone to absorb the cruelty, while he sat comfortably in the role of the dutiful son. And as I turned on my side that night, I knew I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let them believe they could laugh at me while eating the food I'd cooked, sitting in the house I'd cleaned, using the comfort I'd sacrificed to provide. No, this wasn't going to end with me staying quiet, because once you've been humiliated like that, you either shrink forever or you start sharpening the blade of your resolve. And I was done shrinking. The next morning I woke up before him, my body running on rage instead of sleep, and I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook in front of me, writing down every single dollar I had spent on his family since the day we married, and the list grew so long I had to flip the page twice. Groceries. When his parents forgot their wallet, gas for trips to visit his father at the hospital, new clothes for his sister's kids because she said she was short that month, the deposit I put down on the family cabin because they promised to pay me back and never did, and now the $2,500 wheelchair that I had bought in good faith, and they turned into a joke. And as I stared at the list, the weight of it pressed down on me like a stone, because it wasn't just money, it was my time, my labor, my belief that giving would earn me a place at their table, and all I got in return was ridicule. When my husband finally stumbled in with messy hair and his usual half-asleep scowl, I asked him one simple question. "Why didn't you defend me last night?" And he shrugged like it was nothing, like my humiliation was a minor. inconvenience compared to the precious laughter of his family, and that shrug was my breaking point because it told me exactly where I stood in his world, at the very bottom, beneath even their cruel amusement. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry. I just closed the notebook slowly and slid it across the table toward him. And when he opened it and saw the list of debts they owed me, I said quietly, "This is over. You and your family don't get to laugh at me while living off my sacrifices." He blinked like he couldn't believe I was serious, but I was already serious enough to make a plan, and that plan would take away the comfort they thought I would provide forever. Because if they wanted me to be a joke, I was about to show them how much the punchline would cost. I spent the next week moving in silence. No big declarations, no warning fights, just small deliberate actions that would dismantle the comfort they had gotten used to. First, I called the medical supplier and changed the billing address for the wheelchair to my husband's father directly, informing them that all future payments, adjustments, or warranties would be under his name alone. And when they hesitated, I gave them his contact details and made it crystal clear that I would not be responsible anymore. Then I went through our joint account and pulled every receipt I had saved, attaching scans and statements to a detailed report I sent to my own lawyer, because unlike them, I wasn't going to rely on guilt or family pressure. I was going to use paperwork, documentation, and boundaries that couldn't be laughed out of existence. I canceled the automatic grocery orders I had set up for his mother, the ones she always accepted without a word of thanks, and I stopped picking up calls from his sister when she needed a quick transfer until payday. The silence on their end grew loud when they realized the faucet had been turned off, but it was nothing compared to the silence inside my marriage. My husband grew restless, pacing, asking why the fridge wasn't stocked, why his parents were suddenly frustrated with him, and I watched him scramble because for the first time in his life, he was being treated like the adult he claimed to be, not the coddled son his family and I had enabled. At night, he tried to argue that I was being dramatic, that it was just a joke, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't explain. I only repeated the same sentence every time. Respect is not optional. And the more I repeated it, the more he seemed to realize that I wasn't bluffing. Because I had stopped cooking for him, stopped washing his clothes, stopped covering the gaps his family left in his life, and he was left exposed to the reality that without me, they weren't a family at all. They were a drain. By the end of that week, my lawyer had prepared the separation papers, complete with the ledger of every financial contribution I had made, and when I placed them on the table in front of him, I told him calmly that he could either sign and face me fairly, or watch as the court revealed just how much his family's joke had cost them. When the papers landed on the table, his face went pale, not because of the word separation written across the top, but because of the attachments I'd included. The itemized ledger, the bank statements, the receipts that painted a picture of years of quiet exploitation, all in black and white, undeniable, impossible to spin into family generosity or silly misunderstandings. He flipped through them with shaking fingers, muttering that I was making a mountain out of nothing. But the total at the bottom, tens of thousands of dollars, including the $2,500 wheelchair, stared back at him like a mirror of every moment he had let me stand alone while his family chipped away at me. He tried to laugh it off at first, the same way they had at that dinner table, but when I stayed silent, just watching, letting him hear his own nervous chuckle bounce off the walls, the sound died in his throat. "You wouldn't actually take this to court?" he said, but I met his eyes without blinking and replied, "I already have." His face dropped, and for the first time in years, he looked smaller than me, weaker because the power had shifted and he knew it. Word spread fast. His mother called in a panic. His sister left a furious voicemail. His father demanded to know how I could betray family like this, when in reality, all I was doing was finally refusing to betray myself. And instead of shaking, instead of second-guessing, I felt calm because there was nothing left for them to take, nothing left for them to laugh at. When the first hearing date was set, I walked into the courthouse with my shoulders back, not as their scapegoat, not as the quiet daughter-in-law desperate for a seat at their table, but as a woman who had documented every cut, every bruise, every theft they had disguised as family duty. And now, I was done paying the bill. The day of the hearing was colder than I expected, gray skies pressing low over the courthouse, but inside I was steady, holding my folder like a shield, every receipt and statement organized in chronological order. My husband sat 2 rows ahead of me with his parents flanking him like bodyguards, his mother whispering furiously in his ear, his father glowering at me as though his disappointment could break me down. But I didn't look away. When the judge asked for opening remarks, my lawyer laid out the facts in simple, precise language. Financial contributions, documented expenses, the pattern of dependency and disregard, each line reinforced by evidence. I had kept even on nights I thought I was being petty for saving another crumpled receipt. My husband's lawyer tried to argue it was all voluntary, that I had given freely. But then my attorney slid across the table a copy of the group text from the night of his father's surgery, where my husband had written, "She'll cover it, she always does." That single line cracked their whole defense. The judge raised her eyebrows and asked if I had indeed covered their medical equipment, and when the answer had to be yes, I saw the first fissure spread across their composure. His sister avoided my gaze. His mother folded her arms. His father tapped the armrest of that same expensive wheelchair as if clinging to it for balance. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. I just sat still, my silence louder than their excuses. Because for the first time in years, it was their turn to squirm, their turn to be seen for what they were. Not family, not protectors, but parasites who had laughed too long at someone who kept every receipt. By the second session, it was no longer just about money. It was about exposure, because the judge had ordered a deeper review of our joint finances. And when the records came back, they revealed transfers. Thousands of dollars I had deposited into our household account, quietly rerouted to his parents' bills, his sister's rent, even a family vacation fund I had never been told about. My husband's face turned ashen when those numbers were read aloud, and his mother hissed under her breath. But the courtroom was silent except for the sound of truth unraveling them. I didn't even need to speak. The documents spoke for me. My lawyer submitted a summary showing how, in 3 years of marriage, more than 40% of my income had gone to subsidizing his family's lifestyle, while my own savings dwindled to almost nothing. The judge looked directly at him and asked, "And what financial contributions did you make toward your wife's stability?" He stammered, muttered something about emotional support, and the courtroom actually chuckled. Not with me, as the target this time, but at him, because everyone could see the imbalance. For once, it wasn't me being the joke. It was him. The man who had let me bleed out financially while he played the loyal son. His father slammed his palm on the wheelchair armrest in frustration. His mother called the process unfair, but the judge silenced them with a firm reminder. This is not a family dinner. This is court. And sitting there, watching their outrage collapse under the weight of facts, I felt a calm kind of revenge take root. Not fire, not rage, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing that their laughter had led them right here, to a room where their voices didn't matter, and mine finally did. When the ruling finally came, it wasn't just validation, it was liberation. The judge acknowledged the clear financial exploitation, the imbalance, the years of my resources drained into a family that mocked me instead of respecting me. She ordered restitution, a division of assets that left me whole instead of hollowed out, and, most importantly, she recognized my right to walk away free from any future obligation to them. My husband sat there slack-jawed as the words were read, his parents fuming beside him, their whispers sharp enough to cut, but powerless now because every attempt to twist the narrative had failed in front of impartial eyes. I gathered my documents, slowly, carefully, not rushing, savoring the weight of the silence in the room. His father's wheelchair creaked as he shifted uncomfortably. The same chair that had once been a symbol of my sacrifice turned into the most expensive prop of their downfall. His mother avoided my gaze for the first time ever, and his sister pretended to be absorbed in her phone. I didn't need to gloat, didn't need to throw their cruelty back at them, because the outcome spoke louder than anything I could have said. As I stepped out into the cold air, papers in hand, I felt lighter than I had in years, as though each receipt I'd saved had finally paid me back in freedom. And in that moment, I knew the laughter they had shared at that dinner table was the last time they would ever laugh at me, because I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I was the woman who walked away with proof, with dignity, and with a life they could no longer touch. In the weeks after the ruling, the fallout spread through their lives like cracks in glass, each day another fracture they couldn't repair. His father, once so smug leaning back in the chair I had bought, now had to deal with the billing statements arriving in his own mailbox. Insurance disputes, warranty notices, maintenance costs, all redirected to him as I had arranged. His mother, stripped of the quiet financial safety net I had provided, began calling relatives for help. But word had already circulated about what had come out in court, and people weren't so quick to open their wallets. His sister, who once treated me like her personal ATM, sent one final text asking if I could at least help with the kids' school clothes. And when I didn't respond, she tried guilt, then anger, then silence. And my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, was left to sit in the ruins of the family's pride, his phone buzzing with their demands and complaints, no longer able to deflect them onto me. I didn't answer his calls, didn't respond to his late nights, emails begging me to reconsider, because there was nothing left to reconsider. I had walked through humiliation, through betrayal, through the endless echo of their laughter, and I had come out on the other side with something they couldn't touch: self-respect. Every morning I woke up in my own small apartment, sunlight, spilling across clean counters and a quiet space that was mine alone, and I felt peace. Not the fragile peace of keeping others happy, but the steady peace of knowing I had chosen myself. And though sometimes the memory of that dinner still flickered in my mind, the sound of their laughter, the burn of their mockery, it no longer hollowed me out. It only reminded me of how far I had come, and how much stronger I had become once. I decided their approval was worth nothing compared to my own freedom. Months rolled by, and the distance between us stretched into something permanent, not just in legal papers, but in spirit, like a door I had closed and locked behind me. I rebuilt slowly, piece by piece, paying down the debt I had carried alone, learning the strange relief of spending money only on myself, rediscovering small joys that had been smothered under their constant demands. A cup of coffee savored without guilt. A quiet walk in the park without my phone buzzing with yet another favor. I started therapy, and for the first time I admitted out loud how deeply their laughter had scarred me, how years of silence had convinced me I deserved it, and how much power I had handed over to people who saw me as nothing more than a resource. My therapist reminded me that keeping receipts wasn't petty. It was survival, it was proof, and in the end, it had been my salvation. Meanwhile, through the grapevine, I heard the stories unravel. His father had fallen behind on payments for the chair. His mother had alienated friends with her endless pleas. His sister had lost a job after showing up late too many times, counting on others to cover for her. And my ex-husband, stripped of both my income and my loyalty, had moved back in with his parents. Their golden boy returned, but tarnished, no longer the man who could hide behind my quiet strength. They had laughed at me once, loud and cruel, but now they lived in the echo of that laughter, a hollow sound that cost them more than they ever imagined. I didn't need revenge delivered in fire or fury. I didn't need to scream or slam doors. My revenge was in the life I rebuilt, the silence I left behind, and the knowledge that they would never again sit around a table and mock me while eating. Food I had paid for, because I had closed that chapter with the ink of every receipt they thought I was too weak to save. I look back now, and I see that the moment they laughed wasn't just cruelty, it was a revelation, a mask slipping, a spotlight on the truth I had ignored for far too long. They showed me exactly what I was to them, and instead of breaking me, it freed me. Because once you know where you stand, you can finally choose where to go. And I chose away from them, away from the table where my worth was measured in how much I could give and how quietly I could endure being belittled. Today my life is smaller in some ways, quieter, but it is mine, and in that quiet I find strength. No one drains my bank account behind my back, no one mocks me in front of a crowd, no one sits smug in a chair I bought while pretending my sacrifices were meaningless. And when I hear laughter now, it doesn't sting, it warms me, because it comes from people I trust, people who see me as equal, not expendable. Sometimes women write to me after hearing my story, asking if they should keep giving, keep hoping their in-laws will one day appreciate them, and I tell them what I wish someone had told me years ago. Giving without respect is not kindness. It is self-destruction, and no amount of sacrifice will turn mockery into love. My revenge was never about destroying them. It was about saving myself, walking away, choosing dignity over duty, peace over performance. And though I once thought family meant loyalty at any cost, I know better now. Real family doesn't laugh at your generosity, it treasures it. I am not their scapegoat, not their wallet, not their punchline. I am a woman who walked through fire, gathered every ash of proof, and built a life where I am no longer the joke, but the author of my own story. And maybe, just maybe, they sit together sometimes and remember that dinner, that cruel laughter, and realize it was the last time they would ever laugh at me because I turned their mockery into my freedom.